I'm Games, and this is a podcast.
I am also Games, and we're talking about Nioh. This is a game that we purchased under the pretense that I love the Souls games, and you hate the Souls games. And people were like, Nioh is basically Souls, but faster, more like, I don't know if combo-driven is a phrase I would use, but like people gave the impression that it was a more action-centric version of the Souls games. And so we wanted to see if that would appeal to you more.
Because you love Souls, I love Ninja Gaiden. This is a Team Ninja game.
That too.
It seemed like a match made in heaven.
It turned out it was a match made in hell. But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that either of us don't like it. I quite like Nioh.
You know what? I have to say that I'm enjoying my time with Nioh as well. After putting...
Which is astonishing, because you...
50 hours maybe, but a lot of hours into Nioh.
This game, it is very different from Souls while also being very similar. And, like, it's the kind of thing where... I was going to write a video about this game, but ultimately I was like, fuck it, let's just do a fucking podcast, because there's just a lot you could say about it. But the biggest thing that stuck out to me is that when you pick this game up, immediately it feels and looks like a Souls clone. The controls are very similar, the enemies are very similar, the levels, like graphically, it looks very similar. It's got the same kind of structure of like traps and... enemy layout being the main thing to look out for. It's hard. It's got a Souls system. It's got the same... Basically, anything that's in the Souls games is in this, except for, like, maybe the use of humanities and hollowing. But, like, there are analogs to most of the shit that's in there. But what you eventually realize about Nioh is that it also contains about 70 other mechanics on top of that, and that it's the longest game ever made.
There's so much fucking shit in Nioh.
It's unbelievable.
I'm level 75 in Nioh currently, which is nothing, because there are Twilight missions that like have the recommended level in like the 300s.
75 is like end game level for a first playthrough of Souls game.
I'm not even close. I made the mistake of watching a video of some guy ranking all the bosses in Nioh. And some of the bosses that come later are fucking terrifying. There's one boss in particular that I'm not looking forward to that's a Hydra. So you're on a roof and there's like 7 huge heads towering above you. And you have to fight 7 Hydra heads all at the same time. And I'm just looking at that and I'm like, I don't even know how to even begin to do this. This is fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's daunting as a game.
That daunting is probably, like, if I was going to describe Nioh in a word, that would be it. There's still mechanics that I'm learning about now at level 75.
I mean, I'm well over probably 15 hours into the game myself, around level 40 something, and yeah, there's mechanics I haven't even tried to explore because, for instance, so first of all, you've got, like, on a baseline, 3 stances.
Yes.
So there's only like 6 weapon types, I think. So like that's the one thing that is more streamlined, because like in the Dark Souls games, there's tons of unique weapons that all do different things, but they mostly do one different thing. It's like there's a lot of like subtle nuance in the variations of weapons that are kind of similar. Or there's some weapons that are just totally unique and don't do anything like the other weapons, but those mostly have either very esoteric purposes or you use them because you're trying to do a run with that weapon and you want to see what it would be like. And like a lot of people have fun with that kind of thing. It's a bit more expressive, but it's like with a game like this and Bloodborne toned down the number of weapons considerably, but in Bloodborne, you almost felt like you just pick one weapon and do the whole game with it. It's very rare that you find yourself, like, swapping them out for different circumstances. In Nioh, you have, like, 6 viable weapon types, of which you are getting new weapons all the fucking time.
Yeah, it's like a Diablo-esque loot system where you're just constantly picking up shit.
Right, and that's what makes it very different from Souls in the way you actually play it. In spite of being so mechanically similar in terms of like if you're just talking about moment-to-moment gameplay, yes, it is very similar to Souls. If you're talking about the whole experience of playing the game, it will not feel anything like Souls because it's mission-based. You're encouraged to go back through missions more than once or to do sub-missions in the same locations that put you through in a different order. There's just ass loads of loot, tons of optional enemies, and just random shit that you can collect. And, like, min-maxing is the order of the day. It's all about, like, constantly replacing things, looking through your stuff, seeing what's the best things you have. It is a little excessive. You pick up too many items to really go through them all.
Shit, because like you have 2 melee weapons equipped at all times, 2 ranged weapons equipped at all times, 5 different pieces of armor, and then 2 charms.
Yeah.
And then you have 2 sets of quick slot items that you can use for consumables, and there's all your weapons have status effects and stuff. They can like do additional things, and then eventually you find out, you can get special armor sets that if you're wearing multiple pieces of the same armor set, you get additional bonuses on top of that for each part of the armor set you're using. And then there's a whole thing when you get to the blacksmith, you can do soul matching, where you take, like, if you want to keep using gear that you have and you like because they have good status effects, you can take higher level gear you get later that's worse and power up the stuff you have equipped right now so you can keep using that shit.
You're already getting so high level that it's like I can't even keep track of all the things that are coming out of your face right now.
And then if you find gear that has certain stats that you like but others you don't like, you can go to the blacksmith and have those stats randomly re-roll to something else.
That's
you can
the
change your beard. There's a lot of shit you can do in this fucking game.
Because in the Souls games, there's a very limited number of items, and all of them are important. So, like, let's say that you get a set of armor that has great poison resistance. Like, you might find that in one part of the map, and then when you get to the part where you need poison resistance, you go, oh shit, I have that set of armor, and you put that on, you play that part of the level, and then you swap back to your standard armor that you've been using. In Nioh, you might have, like, every single level you get a set of poison-resistant armor, and then you've got the better ones, and then you've got, well, this one's got 3% poison resistance, but 15% stab bonus, whereas this one's got 15% poison resistance and 2% stab bonus. So which one do I want to use for this particular part? And like,
you see, there's even more than that, because it's like, well, I could put on the armor that gives me the poison resistance, or I could put on this armor that's better, and I could spend some of my ninja points to get the jutsu that allows me to use poison resistance.
Right.
Or do I want to stack the poison resist jutsu on top of the poison resist armor so I have more poison resist in this particular situation?
I mean, it very quickly reaches a point where you can basically do fucking anything. Like, you can go as far with this as you want, or you can just over-level and overpower the game. It's just most of what I did. Because, like, the funny thing about it is you can still play it kind of like a Souls game, and the way I've been playing is I equipped the strongest possible weapon, big axe. I always just equip whatever is the one with the biggest number. Because there's one big number that's just like attack or defense, and then there's like all these other numbers for status effects. And like, this isn't, like, I don't think the way I'm playing is necessarily the best way, because sometimes I run up against an enemy or a boss or an encounter that I struggle with more than others, and then, you know, like, eventually I get good and I beat the guy, but then I watch you play, and you might have no trouble with that same enemy, and I'm like, well, what the fuck? And you're like, oh, well, I equipped this, this, and this, because I actually looked through my items, you know?
Right.
Me, I've just been like, equip the biggest axe, equip the best armor that I can without fat rolling. Like, anything, whatever has the highest defense but won't put my equip load so high that fat rolling is a Dark Souls term. You don't always roll in this game, it's more sidestep dodges like Bloodborne.
Well, that again, it depends on the stance, because there's so much I can fucking talk about with Nioh, because I've gone on this whole fucking adventure with it. Because like I never played Souls games really. I played a little bit of Bloodborne and I wasn't a huge fan of it. I played the beginning of Dark Souls 1. I was like, this is the gayest shit ever and I don't like it. I want to go play Devil May Cry again. That was kind of my experience with it. So if you watch our streams of Nioh, it's just me getting fucking reamed. Because I have no fucking idea how the structure of this game is supposed to work or how it's supposed to be done.
It's really fascinating because we did like 3 streams of just trying to beat. There's like an introductory level and then like the first level. And you were on that first level for like 6 hours worth of streams.
It was bad.
I then went and played the game myself, playing it like how I know a Souls game to be played, and I had no trouble at all. Like, I just breezed through it. And I realized that it was because I just ignored everything. I ignored all the variables, and the way I eventually learned to play the Souls games, because the Souls games are still complex. There's still a lot to learn, but it's just not nearly as crazy as Nioh is.
Sure.
With Souls, it's more about the fact that it's so open-ended that actually finding the things that are useful is hard, whereas in Nioh, it's... Because, like, if you know the map of Souls, you can just, like, run into a super difficult area you're not supposed to go to, get the strongest sword in the game, let yourself get killed, respawn back at the beginning, and you have the strongest sword in the game, you know? And then you can, like, grind for 5 minutes to level up your strength enough to use that sword, and now you're overpowered as shit. In Nioh, it's not like that. You can't just run ahead because it's not an open world. It's mission-based. So you're always going to have stuff that's like relative to the level you're at. It's always going to be like a natural progression through the game. You can't cheese it as easily. However, how I played Dark Souls was just put all of your points into vitality and strength so that your life bar is as big as possible and you do as much damage as possible, which just makes everything easier. Enemies do less damage to you, you do more damage to them, and since these games tend to incentivize the, quote, don't get greedy approach, where if you just run in, hit them once, and run away, you're less likely to get hit. But it's not necessarily as fun a way of playing. I find it fun because I like to kill enemies in one hit. I think the most satisfying way for me is when I just smash them with a big axe and they die, and I think it's hilarious. So I will over-level myself to make that happen. Most people want to have encounters where there's more action, where you're running in and out, where you do combos, where you attack more times. And so, like, you initially had been playing with the 2 swords approach, which is that. Like, 2 swords, they do less damage, you do more attacks, it takes up less stamina per attack. However, because you're not used to stamina-based games, you were just, like, running in, mashing combos on the enemy, like, you know, doing all these sword slashes, then having no endurance and getting slayed. I'm over here, big axe, I run in, I smack them once, I run away. I run in, I smack them once, they're dead, you know? And, like, so because I was taking that understanding of Souls to this game, it was easier. However, for instance, the second boss in the cave, which is this, like, bat woman, gave me a really fucking hard time because she's always moving around and it's really difficult to get in for a hit if you are carrying a heavy axe because it takes a second to wind up that hit, and she does not have much downtime between attacks. She's constantly moving around and, like, she'll paralyze you all the time, and just generally, like, you know, getting a hit in is the hardest thing about this boss if you're using a heavy weapon. You had nowhere near as much trouble as I did on this boss. It took me like 3 hours to beat her.
Yeah, I think I got her on my 3rd go.
So what changed? Like, what did you do?
I mean, I changed to mid stance.
I eventually had to do that to make it work. So that's the thing. There's 3 stances, and you can change between them on the fly, completely in mid-combo, change stance, which is fucking crazy when you, like, think about the number of possibilities. And, like, it's not as exciting as, like, a Devil May Cry where you are, you know, where the things you're doing look and feel ridiculous. Yeah. And, like, you're going up in the air and you're doing all this crazy shit. But, like, just the variety of what can be done.
There's a lot.
By switching stances mid-combo, switching weapons, just, like, doing all that shit. And, like... Because basically every time the enemy goes into an attack, like, there is an optimal strategy. So it's like you could be switching stances all the time and always changing the way you deal with scenarios. My tactic had been always use high stance, because it does the most damage.
Right.
So you run in, you use high stance, you drop an axe on their head, they die. On a boss fight, that is not that useful, because doing a lot of damage is less important because it's not going to make the match end faster.
Right, and I think one of the big issues...
Well, it will, but not as fast as
the issues
you want.
with using high stance all the time with the axe is that there's tons of... your heavy attack with the axe is a 2-hit combo.
Yeah.
You know, you do the kind of the flip thing where you strike and you do a flip and you hit again.
Yeah.
Which is actually really good because that second hit
you can change the direction.
It follows the enemy, which is great for a lot of guys, but you have a huge window to get hit with that.
Right.
And especially against that boss, using that move basically like will kill you.
So like a lot of my early part of fighting her was just figuring out, like, trying again and again, because in my head I'm determined to use high stance. I'm just like, maybe if I learn the attacks, if I learn how to do it right, I will eventually be able to overpower her. At some point, after dying enough times and knowing all the attacks, I'm like, okay, high stance isn't working. Let's try mid stance. Mid stance is a little faster. It's easier to just get a hit in and roll away. Alright, sick. And like if you use low stance, you do the least damage, but you have way easier time like just canceling out of attacks, running around and stuff. So like clearly all three are important, and you cannot just play the game using one all the time.
There's even so much more to it than that, because mid stance is actually the most flexible, and I didn't even realize this until like there was a loading screen when I died, and that's where it said it. I'm like, oh, it's like mid stance is the stance to block in, because if you block in high or low stance, it uses double the amount of stamina to block. Mid stance is designed for blocking, so you can block way more hits.
I literally, this is just because I have bad habits from the Souls games. I never think to block. Blocking is so much better in this game.
Yeah.
Because in the Souls games, it's mostly about, you mostly block if you fucked up. Like, because you should always be able to dodge. Enemies are very slow. And so, like, and dodging doesn't take up that much health or whatever. But, like, every time you block in a Souls games, it's a roll again, like, of how much defense you have versus your shield has versus how much attack they have. So, like, it's very easy to get pierced in a Souls game. And so, unless you have an incredible shield and incredible defense, you're not gonna block that much damage. And like, if you have such high defense, you're probably heavy, and that makes the matches just harder. Like, in Dark Souls, the easiest way to play is to just be naked. Like, just be naked, carry a big club, and because you'll be so much faster and most enemies are slow, that you can easily roll around them, get in their ass, and just stay in their ass. In Nioh, it's not so easy, because a lot of the enemies are way faster. You don't have so many opportunities to attack. They might take to the air. They might just, like, not be available to hit as often.
Right.
And so, like, yeah, but when you block, it's like you don't take damage unless you have no stamina. And, like, you know, it obviously takes a chunk of your stamina away, but it's not instantaneous. It depends on the enemy and how hard they hit, but, like...
And, of course, you can put more points into getting your stamina. And you get the titles, which is a whole other thing we haven't even talked about yet. As you play, you get points into titles, and the more titles you have, you can put points into having your guard break be higher.
The min-maxing is insane.
There's so many.
It is insane, because every time you finish, but like it's really satisfying because the levels are extra long, and like there is stuff you can do within the levels, but like if you're doing fine, if you're coasting through a level, you're probably not going to stop at the shrine and do anything because you're doing fine. You're just going to keep playing, keep beating up enemies, then you're going to get to the end of the level and you go back to the world map, and that's when you're going to take care of business. You're going to figure out what's the best equipment you have, get it equipped, go to the armory, get your swords upgraded, rearrange stats, like figure out what's going on. And it's satisfying because the levels are long enough that you don't feel like you're doing that all the fucking time. But if you are struggling in a level, you can stop at one of the save point shrines and be like, okay, let me figure out what I'm doing wrong. Let me look through my items. Let me offer, like, so if you have excess items, you can offer them to, like, the god of the shrine, and he will give you extra health potions and shit. So, like, it's almost like, and I know this is one of the problems that you have with this style of game, and I've been trying to reassure you differently, and I'm curious if your mind has changed. That One of the most important things to understand, like the zen of the Souls game, is to realize that the souls don't really matter. Like, it's not that big a deal to lose all your souls. And like, I think a lot of people, when they lose all their souls, they rage quit because they're like, oh my god, I had 30,000 souls. But once you get to a high level, you're like, oh well, 30,000 isn't enough to level up.
I'm at
so,
that
like,
point now. Like,
right.
I think the next level I need like 130,000.
Right.
Like,
it's a lot. And like, at some point you realize the equipment is way more important and you keep it. So if you just run through a level and gather shit, like, no matter what, if you die and you've even picked up one item, you've made progress. It doesn't feel like it because you haven't made physical progress through the level, but you've made progress in how well you can complete the level. Like, so if you picked up an item that was useful in any way, then you've made some progress, and every item is useful because at the very least you can sell it to the shrine and get, even if it's only 5 Amarita and like a medicine, like you get medicines pretty easily. Like, if you just keep selling shit to the shrine, you might get like 20 medicines
it's
in a
good
go,
to even have
know?
that too, because when you start the game you get 4 elixirs, which are, you know, the Estus and this.
Right.
But if you have a big stock of them in the shrine, when you die and respawn you'll have 8.
Right.
And that's way more useful.
That's similar to the Bloodborne mechanic, where you can only hold 20 blood vials, but if you collect more, it'll just autofill you back to 20 every time you die.
Right.
And it's super cool, and you can get a lot of them pretty easily by just like, because for me, like, there are reasons to really pour through all of the weapons you have and everything, and like, you have a storehouse where you can just throw things into the storehouse. So like, if you have weapons that you might go, okay, this isn't the most useful to me right now, but in 3 levels it won't have as much of an equip burden and I'll be able to use it, so I'm going to store it until then, unless I get something better in the meantime. Like, you can really think about all your items, or you can do like I was doing, equip the strongest one, sell absolutely everything else, have 8 more medicines when you start the next mission, and just, you know, feel more comfortable with exploring and going out of your way and stuff like that.
I think there's a lot of interesting, like, subtleties to the game that, as I've been playing it, I've been picking up on that, like, I don't know if you figured out because you were just playing in high stance the whole time. Like, one of the interesting things is, like, I pretty much at this point play in mid stance unless I specifically need high stance, because I ended up just switching to axe. I was using just single sword for a while because I had a good one. And I was putting points into heart, which heart gives you more sword damage. But like, I was still just swinging more with axe anyway, just because the axes do more damage by default.
Right.
So I was like, well, I'll just fucking use axe. And I felt like it was a waste of time, just because like, I put all this points into heart, but axes use strength, so I'm gonna go back and like, should I restart the game? But it doesn't matter because the game wants you to put points into everything.
Yeah.
Because
and that's very different from Souls 2, because, and it's funny because this game is way more direct with you about what to do. Like, Souls games deliberately are as vague as possible about what to do. They want you to figure out everything for yourself. So you started off, and like, you have to, every time you pick up an item, you're expected to read the whole description, and like, they're all written cryptically. So it's like, actually figuring out what to do is half of the battle of the Souls games. Nioh is like, look, this game is complex as shit. There's a million things going on. You need to know this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna tell you like what things do. So like, when you level up, it straight up says like, this stat is useful for this weapon, but that doesn't mean it's not useful in general. And like, Nioh, more so even than Dark Souls, expects you to change it up along the course of the game. Because again, it's Nioh is not a game that's about playing through it from the beginning over and over again. It's about New Game Plus. Dark Souls, this is something I've seen people criticize Dark Souls for, and I never really understood why until experiencing Nioh, because I've never played these types of games, really. I've never played Diablo. But in the Souls games, you can go up New Game plus, but there's no point. Like, once you've played New Game, you can go like 2 pluses, and you'll still find new things. But when you get to like plus, nothing new is happening. The enemies are just getting a little stronger, but you can get, like, you scale so much faster than them that by the time you get to +4, you are just an infinitely destructive force that will have an easy time from then on. With Nioh, because it encourages you to use all of the weapons all of the time, you can get to New Game +8 and still have somewhere to put your points that has a real tangible effect. Like, you can keep building this character until he's good at everything.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not even so much that like you have things to do, but there's like, you have this entire skill tree, right? And each weapon type has its own skills you can get. And by default, like, your guy starts out as a samurai, so you have samurai skill points, and you put those into weapons, and you get new skills and things like that. But you meet people that teach you how to do magic, like sorcery and ninjutsu. So you have ninjutsu points and Nioh magic points as well. And so there are two skills you have that give you points in that to learn how to, do mage stuff and ninja stuff.
Right.
But in between missions, you can go back to the dojo. And to go to the dojo, you can learn from those guys. If you do these missions by them, you unlock more things in the skill tree.
Right.
More samurai stuff, more ninja stuff, more magic stuff. But you can only do those missions if you have high enough points in those stats. So if you're only putting your points into strength and you only still have 5 spirit, which is your magic, you can't unlock the rest of the tree in magic until you dump another 10 or 15 points to unlock the adept and veteran skill parts of the skill tree. So you have to go spend, at my point, if I wanted to start doing mage stuff, I'd have to spend like 2 million Amarita to get enough points to actually unlock the next part of the magic skill trees, because I just never touch them. But there's lots of really good things in there.
Yeah.
Like, there's debuffs and ways to like slow down guys. Like, the interesting in Nioh, what I'm realizing, is almost every skill that enemies use, you can learn too. So like, when you like the paralysis thing in that second boss, you can do that. You can learn that in the Nioh magic branch. It's like, paralyze people, just wail on them and they can't move. And it's like, it's really interesting in that way.
Yeah, and like, the Souls games kind of have that too, in that like, if you keep playing New Game +++ and you keep getting Souls, and like, you decide you want to be a mage, you can put your points into that and be able to use the spells and shit. But like, it really feels like in the Souls games, it's more encouraging you to just start over. It's just like, pick a build you want to do, play through the game that way. And Nioh got a lot of criticism from Souls fans when it came out over just not having as strong of level design, not having an interesting narrative, because the narrative is fucking...
It's Team Ninja.
It's Team Ninja. If you haven't played Metroid Other M, well, let me tell you, they're not the best at writing a story, but like, there is a shocking amount of mythology and stuff going on in the game. It's just not, like, it's just kind of, who cares?
The main guy, William, that you play as is based on a real historical figure.
I didn't know his name was William.
Yeah. He's That's a real hilarious. Guy.
I didn't know that.
They're all real historical people.
I mean, everything in the game is deeply steeped in Japanese mythology. Like, I can tell that because of the fact that the Souls games, they're Japanese games, but they try to be very Western style, and like, they're not really borrowing from any one mythology. There's a lot of Call of Cthulhu in there, but like, it's not a Call of Cthulhu game. Nioh is a Japanese mythology game.
Right.
Everything Japan is in there. Every shred of Japanese mythology has made its way into this game.
It's a weeaboo's wet dream.
Yeah.
And you're the one fucking Western guy coming in there and cleaning house.
You literally are a weeaboo in this game. It's fucking hilarious. But, whereas the Souls games, they are more of a crafted narrative experience. Like, in spite of the fact that it's such a mechanically driven game, a big part of what people like about the Souls games is that when you investigate the levels, when you investigate the items, you realize that there is this deep narrative behind it all. And like, piecing together the mystery of what really happened in this world is a big part of why people come back to the game. Because, yeah, you can come back and do other builds, but they're not that exciting a lot of the time. Like, some people like to go back and do a mage build or something just to give it a shot. But for the most part, if you keep playing Souls over and over again, you tend towards the same types of builds. Like, most people who are good at Souls will always try to have as little armor as possible. They'll always go in, like, if they do a weapon that's not just a big fucking do a lot of damage weapon, it's because they're trying to be goofy, In Nioh, you really feel like you could keep playing on this file forever, and it will be fun to explore all those other different styles. It will, like, no matter what you do, it is a viable way to play the game just as much as any other, you know? And, like, when I play with the axe, I know it's because I want to keep encounters brief because I'm not confident in my skills. I've seen other people who are, like, when my brother Victor plays, he's like, oh, you gotta go with, like, the dual swords or the swingy thing, because like those are more technical play styles, but like if you can master those play styles, you don't feel any worse for doing it. You don't feel like you're playing in an ass backwards way. You just feel like you're playing in a way that requires more skill on the part of the player, and that you can't just overpower by grinding the way you can with an axe.
There's a lot to learn in how the weapons handle. Like, one of the interesting things that I eventually started picking up on, even though it's very obvious, it's that like mid stance is horizontal strikes and then high stance is vertical strikes, and depending on the enemy you're facing, some of those are better than others, because there's a whole level where you have to fight these spiders and they're low to the ground, so if you're in mid stance you can't hit them, so you have to switch to high stance. But then there's other enemies where like anytime there's like crowds coming at you, you want to be in mid stance because you can hit multiple guys with a horizontal strike. But then also mid stance is the only real stance where not only do you roll, but if you just tap X, you do like a sidestep. So if you want, like when you hit X twice and you do the roll, you get out of dodge, and like you're not gonna get hit as long as you've moved into an optimal position. But there's a decent recovery time on that because like you're farther away from the enemy now, and you have to, like, the animation has to be you getting up out of the roll. So a lot of the times you've dodged the attack, but you've missed your opportunity to counterattack. But if you're in mid stance and you tap X and do the sidestep, you can get right behind them and instantly punish.
We haven't even talked about things like the key pulse.
Right, you can see everybody else's stamina and abuse that.
Yes, oh my god. It's so cool because in, again, to talk about the Souls games, they're more about the engrossing experience. They want you to feel more, like, not to say that you don't see enemy life meters or anything when you're attacking them, but like in this game you can, by the way, options out the fucking ass. You can toggle everything. Yeah. You can toggle the HUD, you can toggle every part of the enemy stuff, you can toggle numbers, you can toggle everything. But you by default can see the enemy's fucking endurance, and in the same way that if your endurance runs out, they can punish you, you can do the same thing to them. So if you see their endurance bar flashing, you can do like a finishing move on them and really fuck them up. But also, every time you attack, this little swirling white light comes up around you. And if you press R1 at the right moment, and it works exactly the same as the reloading thing in Gears of War, where the timing is even the same. But if you press R1, you get your endurance back faster. And at first, it seems pretty marginal. It seems like a really technical detail. But like, if you're mid-combo, it can dramatically increase the amount of damage you can do to an enemy. Like, if you keep doing it every time correctly. Again, it's just like the more you are capable of keeping track of in this game, the more that you, and all of it, you have to make a conscious effort to commit to memory. Because like, baseline, the game's already hard. Yeah. It's already hard to just dodge the enemy attacks on time. It's already hard to find the right opening to strike. And then you add on to that, can you change stances at the right moment? And then you have powers that's like, oh, if you change stance, it automatically key pulses. Or if you fucking dodge, it automatically key pulses. And now it's like, okay, well, if I dodge at this moment and change stances at this moment, and it's like there's so fucking much.
It's not as flashy as a Devil May Cry, but it's deep in its own way.
Oh my god!
I'd argue it's deeper.
It's cavernous. It is very cavernous.
There's a whole fuck ton of shit going on, and then you also have Living Weapon, which is like the power-up thing you can do where you get invulnerability for a while. It's basically a devil trigger, but then as you play through the game, you get more and more guardian spirits, and you can change that, and that dramatically changes the stat buffs and how the living weapon works and how much damage it does.
It definitely feels like they looked at a Souls game and they said, how can we make this as mechanically deep as possible? Like, no stone left unturned. Like, I couldn't... Not only can I not imagine anything added to this, I can't even fathom how they came up with this much.
Yeah.
Because every time something new gets introduced, you're just like, oh, Jesus, I have to keep track of that too? Like, goddamn.
I read that this game has been in development for like 10 years.
Jesus
and
Christ.
it changed genre like 3 times.
Well, that makes sense.
So this is probably just like remnants of like every genre the game was before. I'm just like, fuck it. We built it. Put it all in.
It's really funny that it came out resembling Dark Souls so much that everybody just calls it a Souls clone.
Well, I mean, the last game, the last rebuild was they modeled it after a Souls game.
Right.
But before that, it was like tons of other shit because it's been in development for so long.
It's just amazing how well it all works because, like, there's been a bunch of Souls clones, and, like, most of them are either just trying to ape the appeal of Dark Souls or and doing it worse. Or, like, they change a couple things, but, like, nobody likes it as much as Dark Souls. And, like, with Nioh, I really think that even though the game has gotten praise, it's only over time that more people have started to talk about, like, its unique appeal. Because, like, much of what I heard about it at the time was, like, yeah, it's almost as good as a Souls game, but not quite. But it's, like, you really have to consider what is so different about it, because like ultimately the feel of it is very different. And I will say it is pretty mindless, like, in spite of how much consideration there is for all the different things you can do in the moment. Like, the overall feel of the game is a min-maxing grind.
I mean, it's a dungeon crawler.
It is Diablo. Like, yeah. It more feels like playing Diablo than it does feel like playing Dark Souls, even though it's mechanically almost identical to Dark Souls at the core. Like, that's what's so weird about it, is comparing it to Dark Souls is so obvious, and yet it's not the appeal, you know? Like, I mean, it is insofar as, like, I like the raw mechanics of Dark Souls, so just playing a game that feels like that is satisfying, but, like, the experience as a whole is very different, and I would come to them for 2 different reasons, and I really feel like, in the long run, Nioh is a game I can imagine playing more of. It's not a game I imagine being as satisfied by. I guess it's, like, the difference between, you know, like, as Ego Raptor talks about in his Castlevania videos, like, playing a Igavania versus a classic Castlevania, where it's like, it's less of a complete experience. It doesn't feel so calculated and precisely, like, artistic, but you could play it forever and always be satisfied.
Yeah. And,
like, personally, I don't really care for the Igavania games because I think they're too simplistic. I think it's too easy to just grind up 3 levels and then blast your way through everything. And those games, to attack an enemy is just to go, and that's why, like, I think Bloodstained is going to be a huge letdown to a lot of people because it doesn't look that good visually compared to the other games.
It's weird that it's 3D.
It looks kind of ugly. It doesn't look as good as, like, the 2D Igavania games that had existed before, and well, it will be on portable consoles if you get it on the Switch, so maybe people will be fine with it and people will like it. But, like, when I think about how far that style of game has come, like, Nioh is that kind of game. It's that kind of action RPG. It is really a flash and no substance kind of game, except that it is so deep. And so when I think about playing a game that is so shallow by comparison, it's like, to me, Nioh is a replacement for that kind of game. Like, this is the logical next step of an Igavania, of a game. Granted, it doesn't have an open world. It's mission-based, as I said before, but, like, that mindlessness, that just play this to see flashy things happen, to feel the satisfaction. Because so satisfying to kill enemies in this game. It feels amazing because they explode and blood flies everywhere and their fucking limbs fall off, and if you keep chopping them, more limbs will come off after they die.
That's the best part. There's nothing more satisfying than finally killing someone who's been a pain in the ass, and you get to keep going after they're dead. It's like, yeah, I needed that.
Just the every animation looks incredible. The hits feel great. The sound effects are great. The fact that, like, for instance, I only know it because we first started playing this on IM Games on the live streams, and we didn't have the sound that high up. When I was playing by myself, I realized you need sound in this game because when an enemy sees you, it plays a sound effect.
Right. And
that is a huge boost because you might run into a room and you just hear, and you immediately roll. Because you're just like, oh shit, what's going on? Like, somebody saw me, what's happening? And then you whip the camera around.
The game's
and find
designed
the guy.
with those cues in mind, and like the rooms are set up because like you get fucking jumped all the time, and that's the only warning you get. So if you're not playing with sound, you're gonna get shanked constantly.
And I'll say that like, because the Souls games, people who criticize the Souls games are often taken to task for the fact that most obstacles, if you are observant enough, you would figure out were there. Like, yes, the Souls games will be a dick and hide an enemy in a place where you... Like, they're always basing enemy placement around what you as a player would naturally try to do. You see an item, you run towards it. Enemy comes from the side and hits you.
Right.
Shouldn't have trusted the item. And, like, the expectation is that that will happen to you once, and you'll think, let me not make that mistake again. Let me be observant and slow. And, like, so anytime somebody complains about, like, Dark Souls, being cheap, people say there's always an out. Nioh pushes that even farther.
It does.
It is more cheap. It is more of an asshole. But it also gives you more tools. It gives you sound effects when an enemy sees you. So yes, it will put an enemy in a place you could never have known they were there, but at least you have a hint when they see you. And like, some of the traps are fucking dicks, but like, it's always possible. It just pushes it for. I've seen some people say like, "Oh, Nioh's not fair all the way through." I think it's. Oh, and I haven't played the whole game, so
there's a lot of things that are kind of dickish.
Yeah.
In the game, like there's these certain like there's a level, I think it's like the third or fourth area or something, where it's just like this ruined temple in the water, and there are enemies that just jump out of the water at you.
Yeah.
And you can't see them really because they're in the water, and the whole area, like, you have to... The weird thing in Nioh is that if you touch the water, you're fucking dead.
Yeah, it's literally... I mean, this is how it is in Souls 2, where it's, like, cliffs in the water. It's like, you see... If you can see the ground, it's safe to walk on.
Right.
If you can't see the ground, you are instantly dead. And it's really dumb, because it always is just, like... It's hard. It's difficult to see, and it's obnoxious.
These enemies will jump out at you, and the weird thing is that, like, they don't have a lot of life, but their defense is super high unless they're in, like, a certain animation, so they're a real pain in the ass to fight. And then there's a lot of, like, traps and stuff that just kind of punk you, and it's just like, man, it just feels like the game's being a dick.
It is.
And it is. But that's just the kind of game it is. It's out to fuck you.
It's really funny because the game really takes cues from all the Souls games, and it takes cues, a lot of them, from Dark Souls 2, which I personally consider a bad game. And like, there's a lot of people who will defend Dark Souls 2, and if anything, I would say that is the Souls game that is probably the most similar to Nioh in like the overarching way it plays, where it has more customization, more ability to like do different things. But like, the problem with Dark Souls 2 for me mostly is that it isn't satisfying. Like, the animations really suck. Like, you don't have that, like, everything that game does badly, Nioh does great. But it also copies some of that, like, Dark Souls 2 really tried to push the cheapness to the maximum. Like, it pushed the difficulty as far as it could. It really seemed to think that was the point of the Souls games, is to be hard, more so than to be fun.
Sure.
Nioh copies some of that. Sometimes it seems like it's trying to be more hard than fun. And, like, I know that there's... Like, it's subjective. There are people who feel that way about all the Souls games. Like, some people think that all of them are just mega fucking hard and that it's not fun to play. I think that most of the Souls games are designed around the idea that if you learn a certain fact about an area, it will no longer be hard. And Dark Souls 2 is not like that. It's just hard. Like, because it's just an asshole. It has rooms where it's always going to be hard because they put 12 enemies in there. And, like, the layout of enemies is such that it's as hard as possible. And yeah, you can beat it. It is beatable. But they didn't design it around whether that was fun. And Nioh has moments like that, where it just feels like the thought process wasn't, if you learn this, the fight will be fun. It was, let's make it as hard as possible.
Yeah, there was one particular section, I mean, there's a couple sections like this, I guess, where, because like throughout the game there are these certain demons that are kind of like shrouded in mist, and when you approach them, it's kind of like a mini boss. Yeah. And if you beat them, they're cleared until you beat the level. So if you die, all the enemies respawn, but they don't.
Right.
But later in the game, a lot of the times they will spawn, and then tons of ads will spawn with them.
Yeah.
Or just crawl out of the woodwork, and you're just like, fuck. Like, this guy's already a pain in the ass.
That's
enough.
exactly what the biggest complaint about Dark Souls 2 was so many ads. And, like, nobody wants that because it's not fun, it's just hard.
Right. And then another thing that's weird sometimes, and I haven't been able, someone in the comments can probably tell me, because I haven't been able to figure out what triggers this, is that sometimes those mini bosses, they'll also have, I forget what it's called, but like the lost soul, like the red swords in the ground that if you go and talk to them, it's like if you're playing online, they're corpses of people who've died and you can fight them and gain one of their items. Sometimes they'll be in the same room as these mini bosses, and if the mini boss activates, they will also spawn sometimes.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Without touching them, because there was this one room where I was just constantly getting fucked because it was a submission. It was just waves of guys. You would kill. Yeah. Like 2 guys, 3 guys would spawn in. Then you kill 3 guys, 4 guys would spawn in. But also littered throughout the room was like 5 or 6 of those swords. And then the last wave was just one really big guy. But then all 3 of them would activate at the same time as well.
Yeah.
So what I did eventually is I just slowly went through the room before triggering that encounter and just fought them all individually. And then the last guy was just the guy, and it was easy.
Makes sense.
And it's just weird shit like that. But like, why did they activate in other rooms? They never activate unless you manually do it like you're supposed to. I have yet to figure out why.
That is a mega interesting mechanic. It's similar because in the Souls games you had the blood stains, where if you touch a blood stain, you can watch somebody die. Like, cause it just like, it's basically you watch what happened to someone for like the 10 seconds before they died, and that way you can figure out how to avoid certain traps. Only happens if you're playing online, which I never do because I just don't play games online. In Nioh, instead of that, it's you just fight a person who died in this spot and you fight their avatar. But if you're not playing online, there's still a shitload of ones that they just made, like maybe fucking 25 a level, like all over the place. You can just choose to fight these guys, and they usually have better equipment than what's in the level. Right. So like, it's a little bit more challenging, but if you're over-leveled like I am, then they're not that big of a challenge, and you'll get the best equipment. So
the nice thing about those, you eventually realize, is that because they're based on players, they hit hard, but they have like no HP, because you have no HP at all. So like if you hit them like twice, they're dead.
Yeah.
That's the ridiculous thing, is that like all the enemies have hundreds of times more HP than you do.
It's true.
And it's just like, and the weird thing is that no matter how, leveling in the game almost feels stupid. Like, it just kind of feels like something to do, because you never really feel stronger, because you fight like the same enemies throughout most of the game. Like, each level will introduce 1 or 2 unique enemies, but there'll always be skeleton archers, there will always be skeleton swordsmen, and like, it doesn't matter if you're level 1 or level 75, they kill you in 2 hits.
There is something, like, even though it bothered me how repetitive the enemies are, there is something to be said about the fact that, like, if you see an archer, you always know how many hits they'll take to kill.
Right.
And that's kind of cool, because you generally, like, you can look at an enemy and just look at the way it's designed, and you can get a sense of how strong that enemy is.
That's kind of one of my biggest complaints with Nioh, is that so much of this is, like, gear grinding and things like that, and, like, getting the bigger numbers and all that shit. The numbers don't mean shit.
That is, I would say the biggest problem is that there are so fucking many items that, like, it encourages you to spend a lot of time min-maxing, but you don't have to.
Right.
Like, if you level up 3 more times, which doesn't take that long, I mean, at higher levels of play, maybe it's more so. And that's why, I mean, I have seen people say that, like, the real point of Nioh is to get to, like, New Game Plus 8, and I could see how the game would, like, the way it's structured would make more sense at that level. It's almost like playing through it once is the practice round.
I mean, I don't usually even play games like that unless I super duper love them, so I don't know.
Exactly.
The moment for me where I was like, a lot of this I'm just like doing just because the game wants me to, is that one of the first big choke points for me was the first optional fight against the Warrior of the West.
Yes.
And I'm actually still using that equipment. I keep leveling it up because I get like huge bonuses for having them all. But like, he was kicking my ass, and I still wasn't like really good at the game yet, and it was driving me crazy. And I eventually figured out that like, you have an agility class, and if you're wearing like less than 60% of your encumberment, you're at B class. But if you go naked, you're A class. And then your dodges get even more effective. And like, he was killing me in like 2 or 3 hits. So I'm like, armor, like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But I need to dodge him. So if I have a bigger dodge window, I'll do better. And this is before I figured out if I was in mid stance, I could do the quick dodge, which probably would have made mincemeat out of this guy. But I didn't know that yet. So I unequipped all my armor. I'm like, well, I'll die in 1 hit now, but like, at least I'll be able to dodge. And I'd get hit, and I took like maybe 10% more damage, and I still died in the same amount of hits. I'm like, my armor means literally nothing. Like, it's just there for show.
That's a problem where I think the game is too Souls-like. Because in the Souls games, like, that is generally how it is. It's like the reason everybody plays naked is that, yeah, you can have heavy armor, and if you suck at the game, that is a padding in a way. But, like, the ideal way to play is just to dodge everything. Like, ideally, you don't need armor at all because you shouldn't be getting hit. And Nioh is similar in a lot of ways because it's just so punishing. It's like, in this game, people always say of the Souls games, any enemy can kill you. Well, yeah, if they get like a combo on you. But like, if an enemy hits you twice and you roll away and you run off and heal, you're fine. In Nioh, if an enemy gets a hit on you, kiss your ass goodbye. Like, just dodge everything, always be on top of shit. I mean, not to say that you'll never take a hit, because enemies have a tendency to do this thing where, like, they'll attack multiple times, and maybe you'll get hit by their second attack. Like, you'll get nicked, and you'll go, shit, should I heal or not? Because,
right. I mean, most enemies will do, like, 25 to 35%
right
per hit, regardless of what they are.
But it's way easier to die in this, I feel like, than it is in Dark Souls. And not to say that it's hard to die in Dark Souls. You do die quickly, but like, in Dark Souls, you more feel like you die because you underestimated an enemy or because you weren't prepared enough. In Nioh, you feel like you died because you didn't press exactly the right button at the right moment.
I actually stopped playing Nioh for a while. I went back to Bloodborne to see if like my experience in Nioh would make me like Bloodborne more. It didn't. Like, it actually made me like Bloodborne less, because now Bloodborne felt like I was playing in molasses because it was so slow.
It makes sense because, like, I mean, ultimately everyone was right. Like, we were right to make this decision that you would probably like Nioh more than the Souls games. It just took a lot of exploring to get to that point.
I just had to learn how this game actually functioned.
Right.
And little did I know there was a ton of shit to actually learn. It wasn't like learning a Dark Souls game. It was learning a Dark Souls game and then everything Nioh stacked on top of it.
Right.
There's a whole like clan thing that I haven't even done yet. I don't know if it's just an online thing.
I haven't even known about that.
But like, eventually you can like join a clan and like you get extra buffs, and I haven't chosen one yet because there's like 12 to choose from. And I think that's for online play, but I don't even know. I just haven't even gone back to it because I'm like, I don't even want to think about this right now. There's still shit. There's still new shit happening.
Is this the deepest game? I mean, other than like a Dwarf Fortress or something? Like, is this the deepest action game?
I think it's like the deepest game in the PS4's library in terms of just like throwing mechanics at you. I think the biggest problem with Nioh, though, is just that it's almost depth for depth's sake. I don't think much of it has a huge effect on gameplay. You know, like the most effective thing for all of my weapons was in the beginning, I got a bandit axe that had plus 20 to key damage.
Yeah.
And that was amazing because like every hit, you do like a strong hit and like half the guy's endurance goes away. And you're just like, I can guard break almost instantly.
I would love to see commenters, if you've played this up to like a certain new game, like if you've played, plus or whatever, does it matter more? Because I'm inclined to believe that it will eventually matter more. That like the min-maxing would have more of an effect at higher levels of play, because at some point, if the enemies keep getting stronger than just raw skill, I mean, I guess if you never get hit, then raw skill is enough, but if you you know, and maybe that's the problem with trying to balance a game like this. Like with an action RPG, ultimately, if you can dodge every enemy attack, then no amount of leveling will ever matter.
Well, one of the things that I was constantly thinking about while playing Nioh, and maybe this is just like something I've made up in my brain, it doesn't actually exist in games, but I've always felt when I play something like an action RPG, there's a sense of progression where, of course, like the game scales up with you because it knows that you're going to get more powerful as you play it. But there's like a curve where like if this is like the game and it's like going up at like 20%, like you go up at like 25-30%. So even by the time you get to the end of the game, you feel like even in comparison to the stronger enemies, you've become more powerful.
Yeah.
And then when you go back and play, like if you like in Devil May Cry 1, like if you go fight like a puppet at the end of the game, you just fucking tool on it. Like and it can barely do damage to you because like your life bar's twice as big as it was in the beginning, and like there are enemies that do way more damage and kind of balance it out, but at the end of the game you are stronger. In Nioh, you get weapons and armor just to keep up. You're just as vulnerable at level 75 as you are at level 1. You just are doing just as much damage because you're getting better weapons. Like if you were using the stuff from the beginning, you'd be fucked. You're keeping up with the enemies. They're not trying to keep up with you.
I mean, it also though. I mean, like I said, at some point though, if you got to a point where you could do it at level 1, like because with the Souls games, one of the most common challenge runs is can I beat it at level 1, and the answer is how patient are you? And that's the funny thing about it is when I talked about how I only use the axe and only high stance, it's because when I play Nioh, I don't go in with the expectation that I'm going to beat anything or like make any progress. I'm just playing it because I like the mechanics, So like I might throw on a podcast, throw on the Dick Show, 2.5-hour podcast. I have nothing to do while this podcast is playing. So I'm just going to play this game the whole time. If it takes me 3 hours to beat a boss, so be it. I'm just doing this because I have a podcast playing. So, like, yes, if I min-maxed constantly and, like, I had the right armor set, if I had the right weapons to beat this boss, it would have been easier. But ultimately, in order for the game to be fair, they have to make it so you can beat the boss without getting hit. You have to be... It has to be a possibility that you could beat this at level 1 with the shittiest weapons. Maybe, like... Because if you watch, like, a Soul Level 1 run of a Dark Souls game, like, if they are fighting the final boss, it's going to take fucking forever. And, like, if you're beating it normally, it's a 5 to 7 minute fight. If you're at level 1, it's a 70-minute fight, But, like, how patient are you and how good are you? And for me... my patience is infinite because I'm just playing it to play it. I'm not playing it with the expectation that I'll win. And granted, there are times where I'll get fed up. If I die enough on a certain enemy, like if I, say, finish an episode of The Dick Show and I'm still on the same enemy, I'm going to start reconsidering things and like, maybe I suck too much or maybe this game is boring to me. But like... I don't mind fighting the same boss over and over again if I'm playing it mindlessly. So, like, that's why the min-maxing doesn't feel that relevant to me, because it's just like, I'll just pick the strongest axe, and eventually I'll beat the boss. If I just wail on it enough times, if I just keep getting better, if I just learn all their moves, learn what I'm supposed to do, eventually I'll do it. And, like, ultimately the min-maxing is, like, you spend a little time doing that to make the fight go quicker, but for me, it's more satisfying to spend time fighting and failing than it is to spend time in a menu, because I hate menus. I hate looking through every item and reading all the shit, and like...
There's a lot of that.
It's so much, and if, there's an amount of it I can take, and even for me, like, until the Souls games, I was unwilling to even approach that. Like, that was why it took me so long to get into those games, because I don't want to read when I play a video game. I just want to... Like, my favorite games are Zelda games, My favorite games are you run out and you press A and a guy dies. And, like, that's enough to satisfy me. I'm not a hardcore gamer. I don't need to have my skills pushed to the test.
You can't say that on I Am Games.
I mean, I am games. I didn't say I was hardcore games, I'm not out here Literally, if you're in our audience and you're not playing Dwarf Fortress, you're not the most hardcore and you have no reason to talk. Only Ben Saint can actually say something to me about what it means to be a hardcore gamer.
I guess so, yeah.
Because I've seen him, come into Downwell a year since the last time he played and made it to the final boss, and I can't make it to fucking stage 2-1. If you're not the most hardcore, then I don't want to hear about your cred. I don't give a shit. We all come to art for our own reasons, and games are art. I don't care about being the best. It's not part of the appeal for me. It's a way to spend time. Yeah. And with Nioh, even though the game is hard as shit, I just like the feeling of hitting things in this game. So I will play it mindlessly 4 hours. I don't care how long it takes to beat a boss. I just want to hit things. And if anything, the game is already insanely long, but making it take even longer by not using the optimal strategy, how is that a detriment to me, really? If I'm just using it to kill time. So that's why the min-maxing feels kind of pointless to me, because it's not really necessary. But for some people, being optimal is the appeal. For some people, they want to just play a game that allows them to be as optimal as possible, because there's a fetishistic appeal to that I totally understand. Yeah. I just don't like menus.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the menu things and stuff, but something that I really enjoy with Nioh, and it comes from my Devil May Cry fetish, is just being able to use the mechanics as intended and string together things really effectively and have a good working knowledge of the mechanics at hand and implement them at the right time, so when everything just kind of flows, that sense of flow is what I love about DMC so much.
And that's what's so good about the game, about Nioh, because Dark Souls never really affords you much flow. At the highest level of play, you're still basically whack, run away, whack, run away. In Nioh, it's whack, change stance, whack again, change stance, chain into combo, chain into other thing, and
you can do that some of the times. I mean, for a lot of the bosses, it is just poke, retreat, and I'm sure that if I was better at the game, I could keep things going. If I was key pulsing perfectly after every strike, and being able to stun lock or do things like that, or if I probably put more points into the jutsus and able to do status ailments and stuff, you could do a lot more of that. But just for the basic enemies and stuff, being able to go into a room of 3 or 4 guys and use the stances and stuff and key pulse effectively, so you can take them out without getting hit, and timing your dodge and everything, that's the funnest part for me.
Yeah, I'm really curious about. Because part of the reason that I was interested enough in this game to purchase it and play it on the show is that I found out they're making a sequel.
That's right.
So that's what I'm the most curious about, because this game, it feels like they went as far as they could on making it deep. They didn't go as far as they could on making it balanced. And you can't really do that till you have a lot of player experience. Until you've seen a lot of people, you've heard a lot of interpretations. I'm really wondering, how much will they change it? All the Souls games have been considerably different from each other, in at least subtle ways. It's not just new maps. There's always a mechanical difference. There's always a difference in the way everything works. And some people have more of a problem with new ones. Everybody has their own favorite Souls game. I want to know if Nioh 2 will push it in a better direction, and that'll come down to everyone's individual opinion. What did you like about Nioh 1? If they make the game easier, some people will complain. If they make the game harder, some people will complain. If they make it more balanced, I don't know, how do you do that? I'm really fucking curious about what they're going to do with it, because it's a fascinating game with so much going on.
Yeah. I would appreciate if some things were streamlined. I think the loot could be toned down. I mean, I know that's kind
Definitely. It's just so much. It's part of the point, but you finish a level with 300 new items. It's fucking crazy.
And there's they're mostly just duplicates. There's really a couple sets you can get per level, and there's just I mean, it's good because no item is useless. It'll be Amarita or money, because you can sell them to the blacksmith, and you need the money to to upgrade the gear you actually have. Because like once you start upgrading your equipment, because I hadn't used any of my gold at all, because I hadn't used the blacksmith for like the first 50 levels of the game, because I was just getting equipment from drops. But eventually I got my Warrior of the West stuff, and I didn't want to get rid of it because I wanted the set buffs.
Right.
So then I started upgrading them, and I realized, I just bought 3 upgrades, and all my money is gone from the last 50 levels. And I haven't been able to upgrade again just because it costs so much.
The biggest problem with the loot, I think, is when you want... Because when you're min-maxing, the key is that you're comparing everything. And so, like, when you go down a list of 100 items and you're trying to contain what the best ones were in your head, like, of course, most of the items it's going to be obvious. You just see lower numbers than you've seen before. But you're constantly... For me, it's a lot to even just keep track of what is the strongest one. Like, what I usually do is I scroll through every item and I look, because there's an arrow that points up or down, you know, and I look for the up arrows. I remember all the ones that had up, and then I go back and I look at which was the highest number. That is already time-consuming enough for me that it's, like, a lot. When you add in reading all of the different buffs that they have and then comparing the quality of those buffs and what do you really want, that is fucking excessive.
It's not even just that, too, because, like, you could have an item that's really fucking shitty, just like a normal white helmet, and like, oh, this goes in the garbage. But, oh, this garbage white helmet happens to be level 49, which means I could soul match it to my level 27 good item I have equipped, and it'll double the defense just because it's a higher level.
So much.
Yeah, so it's...
So fucking much.
It's just like, ugh. I mean, half the time I would just ignore it, just press R2, mark everything is sold, and dump it into the shrine. Yeah. But it's just, it's a lot.
Well, I will say, this game is endlessly fascinating to me. It's especially because, like, when we first started playing it, like, you were not into it at all. You were like, I love how... You loved the art design, you loved the satisfaction of killing enemies, but you were like, endurance-based systems are inherently a problem, and I hate it. Now you're level 70-something. Like, what do you think about the game? Like, originally you were going to give it a 5. What do you think about it currently? I mean, you haven't beaten it yet, but no, I think you want to.
I would like to beat it. I mean, that's why I'm doing this. Like, I wasn't having fun, but I was like, no, everybody loves this genre, and this is the one that's the most approachable to me, so I'm going to brute force it and figure out why people enjoy it. And, I mean, do I like it as much as the games that I was saying I'd rather play? No. I'd still play Devil May Cry over this. Like, I still think stamina's dumb. I don't like it as much as being able to just hack away at things and, like, air juggle and shit like that. But I understand the appeal. Like, being able to hit something and, like, the fucking satisfying hits are great. I think this whole genre lives and dies by that. Like, if your hits aren't satisfying, no one's gonna deal with all the aggravation to get there. You know, like, you have to have that. Yeah, I mean, I'd probably give it, like, a 7.5 or an 8, I guess. It's fun, it's good. Now that I understand, like, how it's supposed to function, and I can play to that, it's a totally different kind of game than what I would normally play. But, like, giving it, like, the 30, 40 hours I've probably sunk into it now, yeah, it's good.
I don't even think you're on a bad timetable. I mean, my friends started playing Souls games in 2009, and I started beating them in 2016. So it takes a while sometimes to get into these types of games. Because there's just a lot to learn. But, like, it is, like, it's the kind of thing where you really have to become into it. It takes effort. You have to, like, want it. And I know you mostly wanted it because other people were, like, pressuring you to want it. But, like...
It's not even so much other people. It's just that everybody likes these games. Like, you like them, Nate likes them, Gib likes them, and, like, I can't participate
people around
in that
you
conversation.
Yeah.
And I would like to be able to do that.
I think you can.
When Sekiro comes out, I'd like to play it and be able to talk about it.
I think Sekiro will be a lot easier than Nioh.
I don't know. I was watching some previews of it, and they said, like, the mechanic they're doing is parrying, and that, like, it's parrying instead of dodging, and, like, it's, like, frame specific for these parries. You
can, like, the thing, like, parrying is pretty common in the Souls games. Not a lot of people do master it, but it's the kind of thing that like once you know the timing, you can always just do it. It's always the same, you know. So like if you master parrying, then you're fucking done. So
It looks fucking cool though.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Also looking forward to Nioh 2. I have to piss super bad, so
I guess we're done.
yeah. Anything you wanted to add last minute?
Be the games you want to see.
I am Games signing out, and we might do a follow up on this if either of us beats the game. I think we should do another one to talk about the end, because I do know that this game. Some people have told me that the late game it gets a little ridiculous, and I'd love to see our thoughts completing it. Because at this point, we've already played more of this game than what you would play of a standard game. It's long as fuck.
Yeah.
So, like, we have tons to say even now, but I would like to go back after we've played even more and come back to it. So, look forward to that, and we'll see you in the next one.